This person here, Eduardo?
Hi.
Hi.
Can you hear me? Good. Yeah, I just want to say I've been successfully brainwashed by your movie. Thank you very much indeed. Job done. I wanted to say I think the film's amazing at dissecting the evils inherent in our money system, which are palpable and there for everyone to see. I also think it's a great advert for your resource-based economy. It looks a bit like utopia porn to me. It's in some instances.
Excuse me. Can you ask the question?
Yeah, sure.
Yeah, thanks.
What I'm basically saying is I think the film's weak in terms of describing the transition from the place we're in now to the place that you're advertising. And that's the real problem that I have with it. I can't wait to be in that world, but how do we get there?
Well, that's the million-dollar question. That's why we're here, and that's why there's an event tomorrow. That's why the Zeitgeist movement exists. You know, there's only so much I as an individual and my conditioning, my temperament, and my intellectual capacity can say. I couldn't sit here and tell you how to, quote, change the world. That's going to come from another place. That's going to come from, well, first of all, it's going to be navigated dynamically by what I consider to be the collapse of civilization because of what's outlined in the film. You're going to have problems and pressures that are going to emerge, and you're going to have people seeking solutions to override them. And the hopeful thing that will happen is that this type of direction, this logic will pull through, as opposed to people falling back on some other outdated view. Critical mass, though, is really what I'm going for here. In Zeitgeist Addendum, it started there, where I made that point about the need for critical mass, and if this film doesn't carry over into the activist angle, but in the Zeitgeist movement, I talked to extensive lengths about the need to get people together across the world. And once you have enough people, you begin to put pressure on the establishment. You begin to have, you begin to have economic conferences with scientists that are behind it that can show the complete redesign of North America, that show how you can, boom, here it is. And you get other country leaders or whomever to start to think about it. And in my mind, you develop a parallel structure, a parallel group of people that want to do something completely different. And hopefully, again, the logic will pull through, and the timing will be such that it hits a tipping point, and the powers that be are willing to accept, or maybe will be forced to accept, based on the uprising and the civil unrest and everything else that's happening, which I think will continue. That's how I see it, loosely speaking, a transition occur. But there's so many things that you really can't predict. But at the very base level, you have to get the world to want it. You have to get people across the world, across all borders, because this is a global concept, to want this.
Can I just say as well, it struck me that it wouldn't be this is the sort of thing that everybody has to sign up to in order for it to work, surely. If you're talking globally, well, what are you going to do with people that insist on being irrational?
Well, I think the term, the Amish exist today. The Amish have isolated communities. The Amish have chosen to live lifestyles. And there are many other, religiously oriented subcultures that live very, very differently than the modern capitalist, global society that we have now. So you can accommodate those things. If someone doesn't see the efficiency, if they're really against it, there's no reason that, that there's some animosity there. But they have to understand that if, 60% of the world population wants to live in a resource-based economy and 40% don't, well, you can only hope that a compromise can be made. But I think actually those statistics that I just mentioned are kind of inaccurate. It'd be more like 90% of the population wants to live, because you really do need global resource access, back to your first point. And then the other 10% can be supplied with what they need. But what would you do if you were the other 10%? And you're watching everyone live in a very nice, you know what I mean? So I believe that they would come over to the other side to see the fruits of this. In fact, I have more respect for the Amish and these more simplistic subcultures than I do for this modern capitalist world that's hell-bent on destroying itself. So, see my point. It really comes down to where the stability is. And I think that in the education of anyone, they'll begin to reconcile that it's in their best interest to join a system that's actually sustainable and hopefully progressive and be willing to accept those changes.
And developing skills, I think, is very important. It's the third linchpin, along with the resource-based economy, technology, and human skills, and develop those abilities.
I agree. Thank you. That's what essentially that we're trying to do. As far as the city, though, as you mentioned, building the city, Building a test city, building something that we can show the world what's capable is the intent. Building an isolated community, though, and shutting yourself off and saying, okay, we have our sustainable city, that's not going to fly in the current climate. So I just want to reiterate that if anyone thinks that that's a solution. There's nowhere to hide anymore. It's either the world learns that its survival is contingent upon it learning to work together, or it continues its slow, grueling breakdown.
Pretty much agree with everything you've just said there in terms of how the world's going to go. I've spoken to many, many people who read, who are intelligent, and a lot of them didn't know who you or even Jacques were.
Sure.
And he's been around for ages.
Sure. So
my question to you would be, obviously it would take a catastrophe to get to the point of change. What could you guys do more mainstream, i.e. Discovery Channel, to get this documentary out there, not amongst small groups like this, but mainstream? I've spoken to so many people and they do not know what the Zeitgeist movement is.
Well, I consider, if you really think about it, it's definitely an infancy stage. If you compare our numbers and our reach with, by the way, no heavy monetary contribution, this is all volunteer and independent. People are doing this on their own accord, which is very powerful, by the way. But if you compare ourselves to other activist organizations, or what you want to call them, it took them much longer to achieve the audience and the group that we have. So I think from the angle of progress, for what is really only about 2 years ultimately, I think it's quite effective and quite profound. I'm trying to get the documentary on the Documentary Film Channel. I've had communication with various organizations to do whatever I can. And of course, anyone can show the film. I give the film essentially out. Any television station can basically show it as long as they don't exploit it. And I don't require any type of money for it, which is quite an incentive for them, because there is an audience and all they see is dollar signs and everything else. But
I guess there'll be a few company owners that have investments in certain places that will really want this document on, I would guess.
I'm sorry, say that again?
I guess there'd be a lot of directors, company owners that are capitalists.
Well, that's all this is the system we live in. That's what they see. They see dollar signs. So if they see an audience, that's just a sad reality of it, why they would rationalize it, unless you occasionally get somebody that's in the mainstream that really believes in it and they can slide it in, which does occasionally happen in certain contexts. But I think the progress is there, and I'm doing the best I can. The movie was made in more of a, quote, high-budget kind of way with a much bigger spread to try to appeal to a diverse group as possible. So I'm doing the best that I can. It's really just up to everybody to continue.
So what could we do as individuals? I mean, I work as a recruitment consultant, which effectively is against all the things I'm watching here, but it's what I do for a living. But I've started to go into work feeling like I don't really want to do this because it's all about money and profit. What does the average person who's just trying to get by do?
This is the complex reality. I mean, you have to walk a dual line if you believe in this type of direction, because you can't just throw everything down and assume this is going to happen tomorrow. You can't just disregard money and your future. It's paradoxical in a state of mind. So what I kind of tell people is, you kind of have to wear the movement on your shoulder, and you have to make it a part of your general life. You have to know that you have to submit to the system. If you have the option, if you're in college, try to do something that has some type of social benefit. Don't do what I was forced into and be in advertising for a while. Don't try to stay away from all of the parasitic industries and things that really do nothing at all. And there's a number of them. Try to do something in advanced, in programming, things that relate to design and computers. Computers obviously are not going to stop in their progression and effect. I mean, what we talk about here is very much based on the computational ability to manage the Earth resources correctly. So these are very important fields. So I would definitely recommend that as a general distinction. But to finish that point, anyway, if you're frustrated, don't try to balance your life, as I try to do my best, between your basic survival and trying to promote something that you feel is important for your future and your family's future. If you have kids, obviously their future. And realize that it's just a very noble thing to promote in and of itself.
Maybe I'll come and work for you then as a salesman or something like that.
Oh, sorry?
I could come work for you as a salesperson, maybe.
There you go.
Get it out there.
If I had any money to pay you, of course. You go to the
Hi, Peter. This question relates to the media conditioning. I just want to know how mindful you are of the conditioning effect that your movies have on people who see them, and how responsible you feel in relation to the honesty about how things are likely to change going forwards in terms of social collapse and that kind of thing, and whether it's possible to project a better way to transition, a better way that we can go forwards that could be more acceptable and more humane overall.
Well, I'm not advocating a breakdown. I don't want to see people suffer. I'm beside everything. I'm watching what's happening and reporting what I observe and the research that I've done. So when I explain the collapse in the film, as despairing as it may be, it's simply an observation. And, you know, in the film itself, I don't talk about, you know, the actual transition. And the ending is a big gesture. It's really this catharsis against this kind of monetary reality and all the things that go with it. But as far as positivity of transition, the sad thing is biosocial pressure is what really influence people in their change. It takes stressors to get people to be motivated one way or another. They can be intellectual and they can rationalize and make decisions, but generally speaking, people tend to maneuver themselves based on what the environment is dictating. So I think it's a natural consequence. First of all, if the system worked, let's put this out in the open, if the free market, the free-for-all market as I call it, if it actually worked, then why would I be here? If everything was in balance, then there'd be no reason to do anything. The resource-based economy is an answer to the failure of an evolutionarily flawed system. So I see the despairing attributes, the conflict, the instability as a natural evolution out of this system, unfortunately, which will serve as a motivator intrinsically and inherently for the population to realize that they have to do something new and that it's time to start looking for new solutions and essentially for a new social system where these things simply don't happen. You know?
Yeah, I agree with the observations. I just wonder if it's possible for us to design a better way for the transition to happen.
I'd love to see it. Sure, I'd love to see other people take a shot at it. I'm doing the best that I can in a way that I think is balanced and just, you know, honest. You know, and of course, it's a movie. Speaking of the media quote conditioning, so I do generate an aesthetic for it through music and everything else to give a sense of emotional impression. But if you break just down the data and you read the script, you know, it is what it is. But I encourage anyone out there, all of us, anyone can be a filmmaker now, anyone can do anything in media, to investigate other means, and I'd certainly love to see it. So if you can come up with a way, please send it to me. I'd love to see that gesture.
Yeah, we're all working on it, I'm sure. Thank you.